the first step is to take the image from Photoshop, get that into Flash. So if I have my Photoshop file and it's ready to go, then what I need to do is bring that into Flash, and I can do it by using the import. If I use import to stage, it gives me the option to have all of my layers line themselves up how they were lined up in Photoshop, which is handy if you have a complex piece of artwork that you're bringing in. You can bring it in layer by layer if you're so motivated, or you can bring it in as a group. So if I look here, you will see that I have my different layers showing up. I have my fire layer, my explosion layer, and phase 1 and phase 2 going on. And I intentionally left a few things kind of out of whack in the Photoshop document to illustrate that if all the work that you do in Photoshop is non-destructive, so everything is through adjustment layers and layer masks and things like that, because you're one of those cool newfangled modern Photoshop users who doesn't believe in harming or hurting pixels, it doesn't always work when we try to bring it into Flash. So that's part of what we're looking at here first. So I can choose the layers that I'm bringing in, and if I click on a layer, I can also choose if I had applied styles to it using the layer styles in Photoshop. I could even make those styles editable if I so wanted. I can also create a movie clip out of it right away. So instead of bringing everything in and then having to select it and create a movie clip, I can do that right away, and I can even do it faster by selecting all my layers, clicking here, say I want them all to be movie clips. That works out really well. I can now also choose what type of compression I want to apply in the finished SWF. So if I want it to be lossless, I can choose that. If I don't really care, I can let it be lossy. I can do whatever makes me happy. I can also modify my stage size to match my Photoshop document. So if my Photoshop document was made the size I want my finished project to end up being, I can now, just by starting with a generic empty Flash document, say, oh yeah, sure, why don't you update the size of that to make it the size of my Photoshop file, bring everything in at their original position, and now at this point I can say hunky-dory, and there it is, and it's looking not too bad. So if we turn off the layers, we'll see there's layer 1, there's layer 2. And what you will notice is that when you have an adjustment layer on top of an adjustment layer, then that is no longer present or visible, because going back to Photoshop, if we turn everything off, we'll see that the bottom layer had this hue set adjustment layer applied to it, giving my skin a nice emerald hue. But when I get back over to Flash, we can see that it's no longer there. Then I have my other piece of artwork showing up, the second phase, and both are now being affected by the adjustment layer that was on top of them. So we can see that it effectively rendered out that adjustment layer and flattened it into the image, or applied it to the layers underneath. So the flexibility I have here, I have to be aware that once I go into Photoshop, if I do choose to work in extremely non-destructive manner, so I'm using adjustment layers and layer masks, I may not get full access to those once it shows up in Flash at that point. And then I have my little explosion that sat on top over there. I had the fire that I put on top of that. So yeah, it was just a very happy, rosy demonstration that's now continued on. But they're all movie clips, so they're also on their own layers, which is a good thing. If you notice in the layer palette over here that the layers maintain the same names that they had in Photoshop, which is handy. And that also gives you motivation to name your layers in Photoshop before you bring them in. So both your Photoshop document and now your subsequent Flash file are going to have nicely named layers, which then significantly improves your editing experience, because now you're not clicking on layers trying to figure out which one belongs to which piece of artwork. So naming your layers is a good thing. If we click over to the library, we will see that it now added those symbols here, and those symbols take on the same name as their layer. Again, reason to name your layers. And then we have the assets, the individual pictures that were utilized to create the finished artwork. So that is really bringing artwork in from Photoshop in a condensed version. If you want to bring artwork in from Illustrator, good luck. Your library is going to be filled with every path that was used to construct your Illustrator artwork is going to pollute your Flash library here, and it's going to be just super ugly. It would be as if in Illustrator you went and expanded each and every layer, every object until it was expanded to its absolute simplest path, which on a moderate object may be 100 or 200 paths, and then you'll look in your library in Flash and go, whoa, crap, it's ugly. And then when you're trying to work with it, you'll say, oh, Flash, this sucks, doesn't it? And it does. Typically now is going to be much happier working with bitmap artwork versus bringing in vector paths from Illustrator. Used to be the other way around, but now we seem to have had the greatest success if you're bringing your artwork in. One final point when you're bringing in bitmap artwork, bring it in at the maximum size that you intend to ever show it, and then on stage you can shrink it down to smaller sizes as needed. But if you bring it in at the medium or smaller sizes, when you scale it up in Photoshop, all it's doing or in Flash, all it's doing is interpolating the pixels, and it will be all grainy and fuzzy and look like garbage. So bring it in at maximum size and then scale it down afterward, and that will give you the best results. And if you have too many pieces of artwork, it is possible to cause it to start to run really low on memory and go belly up on you. But typically, if you have a bunch of bitmaps, it's happier now than bringing in a bunch of Illustrator artwork and trying to animate that. Beginning with 3D, the concept that we can play with first is going to be the thing called Parallax. And essentially, what we're operating on here is a principle of things in a distance are going to move at a different rate than objects that are closer to the observer or the camera, or what would be kind of the picture plane of the person looking at this. So the picture plane would be our document window. So we have our document window right here. If we refer to this as the picture plane, and I need to choose it. Choose a color that shows white is not a good color when you're drawing on white. So if that is going to be my picture plane, and then I will have other layers that I will be putting on top of it, or behind it. So within this picture plane, if I have some mountains, oh, need a new color. Mountains aren't going to be red today. I need my Purple Mountains Majesty, because that's just really going to be my best color. Oh, so I have a few holes, silly mountains. Alright, so got some mountains there that I can take and turn into a symbol. And now I'm going to need a tree or three as I work with it. My very happy looking, it's a happy tree for those who know Bob Ross. It is a happy tree. It's actually kind of a homely tree, but I'm going to go with happy today because that's where I want to be. I will have some happy clouds. I might even have a happy sun up there, all kinds of nice things. So I'll have a happy tree, and I can make multiple happy trees in a little bit, so we can work with that. And now I'm going to need actually a layer here, and this will be my sky. My sky we'll just throw in as blue, and Need some ground because the white ground is really not working for me there. Just some. So get some ground, some sky, some mountains, a tree, and this is now going to start allowing me to create the illusion. And oh yeah, and we will get some clouds in there in a little bit. So let's see, that would be, this is where having your layers named will be really useful, because then when I look, I have some clue as to what I'm looking at. And you'll notice I drew the cloud appeared to be going on top of the mountains, but because its layer is below the mountains, it did not. Alright, so we have a cloud up here, got a tree here, have some mountains, and I can now take my cloud, and if I want more than one, and let's lock the sky and the ground so I don't select those accidentally. So now I have my clouds. If I make the clouds into a grouped symbol, this now allows me to move one set of clouds. If I wanted to, I could group together multiple, or have multiple versions of clouds at different scales to create a spatial illusion, which, you know, maybe I'll pull that out and pull that off in just a little bit. But first I'll make my clouds here. And my clouds, currently I'll move them all at the same rate. My tree I'll move at a different rate. I will add in multiple trees in a little bit, but we'll start out with one to get the point across. There's no point, if we can make one item move, we can make 100 items move, so there's no real need to go through and try to get super complicated yet until we demonstrate and build a proof of concept of what's going on. So the key thing in Parallax is objects that are further away move slower than objects that are up close. And I'm going to add one more object in here, because I need a little happy sun. And knowing the principle that objects further away don't move would tell me if my camera is pointing towards the sun and the sun is extremely far away compared to everything else, the sun should remain fixed, because it's so far away that it's not going to move within our field of vision unless enough time passes. So then we let it to show that time-lapse quality of then the sun moving through the sky. But over a short time duration, we shouldn't see the sun move. Okay, so I have my sun, my clouds. So the only layers I need to apply the tween to are my clouds, mountain, and trees. So I can say create motion tween, and I can then move them. So if we say that my clouds are further away, oh, hang on. Go to the end of time here. Now we can see that our picture frame has disappeared, so I will put that back, and my fixed layers have disappeared. I'll put those back. Do not able, don't show me again, no. Cross my fingers that continues to work. Okay, so now at this point, I can move the clouds a little bit. I can move the mountains more. and we'll move the tree a lot. So we'll see that the objects are moving slow, medium, fast. So that now creates the illusion that I am traveling from left to right on the screen as the objects move from right to left. And if we decide that all of that is just it's happening too fast, and we want a more leisurely pace, well, I'll run it like this, and then I'll stretch it out. So we can see it's really happening almost too fast to fully appreciate it, so I will stretch it out a little bit more. Take it from 1 to 3 seconds or so. So we can now see it's creating the illusion of movement. Is because I have my clouds, it kind of is something that works well. There we go. If I go under my clouds and put a little bit of a blur on them, so if we look at it now and watch the project, we'll see that the clouds aren't quite as hard edged compared to everything else. Gives them a little bit more realistic point of view. And if I want to blur them even more, we certainly can pick up that blur. So we can see, so I have my clouds moving, and no, I can't do it. This is where Photoshop duplicate layer would be a nice option. I could duplicate the layer and then just tweak it. But if I had another layer of clouds, so this one is now behind. And to prove that it's behind, we can modify its color and make it just a wee bit darker so it shows. And we could do that progressively, adding a little bit of kind of spatial tint to it. If we don't want to use brightness, we could even tint it instead of towards white. Could even tint it towards kind of trying to get more of a blue-gray. So I'll just add a little bit more of that color in, using the free transform with Q. Shrink it down a little bit so they're a little bit smaller. And now this group of clouds, when it tweens, is going to need to move. My gray cloud on my gray background is getting really hard to see, so we'll go towards this side and move it not quite as fast. So we can see that the front cloud is moving faster. Okay, they need to go a little bit faster, but it's getting there. And then put the blur in those as well. And we start to get that sense of what is showing to the viewer, that sense of the camera is panning across the landscape, creating a three-dimensional spatial environment. Now, using the blur, using the scaling, using the difference in how quickly you move objects across screen here, by hand gives you immense control. So this is fake 3D. This is parallax scrolling, and it's the hot new rage on websites where they do that on different screens, where they make the objects change their position or color or size and do all kinds of cool fancy stuff when you scroll through the document. That's a very trendy activity right now in the web design world. So there's fake 3D. Now I'm going to do a real 3D. So working with real 3D here, I must need my, actually, I wonder. Just going to go grab one more file to speed up the process. I'm going to go get the pig's head here. So these objects here don't exist in the pig's as a whole symbol, so I'm going to if I turn this into a symbol, so I have it as a symbol. When I'm in my new document here, if I go to library, I can now choose the library from one of the other documents. So I can go grab the pig head and stick the pig head on screen so we can do something with the pig. Because, as we discovered previously, bacon is meat candy according to the pig. So that just makes sense that I'm going to have to work with them a little bit longer. So working with this, I'm going to, because I will run out of room if I leave it like this, I'm going to start with it just a little bit smaller to begin with here. Now if I put this object in the middle of the screen, I'm not going to scale it anymore, but if we look at its 3D position and view, you'll notice that objects have an X position, so I can now move it over X position. I have a Y position, but I also have a Z position, where I can zoom in and zoom out and keep on going and going and going. And so you can zoom in and out based on Z position. I'm not using the scale tool, I'm modifying the Z position of this object. And this is where things are going to get a little bit crazy, a little bit, I think, you know, this is going to be when pigs fly as we work with this. So what I'm going to do, and it's possible if you do enough objects and enough 3D transformations on it, we can bring the computer to a grinding halt, and it's really kind of exciting to watch. And we'll look at that and see if we can pull it off this evening. So if I have, I'm going to make a grid of pigs here. And it'll be easier now if I turn this whole grid into a single unit. There's my pigs. Now, what I'm going to do is take all these pigs. So we'll copy this and paste it 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Figure 9, that way I'm making, oh, I probably only needed 3. Oh well, we'll have 9. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens here. If I take, go here and so looking here, we'll see that now I have 9 layers of pigs. So what I can do with the topmost layer is I'm going to give it a negative z position. And we'll say minus 400. So it got really big. And then if I click on the next pig, I'll give this one a minus 300. And then this pig will be a minus 200. And I'm just going to keep working my way down, minus 100. So you'll notice negative values bring the object bigger or closer to you. Positive values will make the object appear to go away. So now this one will be 100. And then 200. 300. 400. 500. So I have this scaling of the pigs occurring in space. So now that I have all of that, and if we zoom way out, if I select all of this, I can now tween it as a group. What's also useful in being able to see what's going on is to even modify the color effect on these and pull it down. So I'll go minus 50, 40, 30, and just keep repeating that. Oh, shoot. All right, so now that the colors have been fixed and I have everything on screen, I can now take everything and convert that to another symbol. And now that particular symbol we can create a motion tween on. And if I tween it, you will notice how it's creating that three-dimensional movement.
So you just put a tween on the whole group?
So the tween, because this is now a group that I took and put all of the pigs into one symbol. So I had my grid of 9, and then I had 9 grids of 9 that are all now one symbol. And now those, we'll extend this out and just keep animating it around so we can start to understand a little bit of what's going on with it. And it is possible now. We can use the 3D transform tool as well. And if I rotate it on the, where is my, no, I don't want to do it. Well, we can rotate on that axis, and we can start to see how it really is just a flat series. See how it's a series of flat shapes? Yeah, this is about, I bet if I continue this out, we're going to see the whole thing explode. And it's going to be really fun. So I'm going to keep we rotate on the y-axis, we can see how it's rotating there. So we've effectively inverted it around. You can rotate on the x-axis. Yeah, I'm thinking that it's really not going to be very happy with me here. But if I try and make the swift, you'll see it's moving around, and so we have the pigs that are still trying to blink a little bit there, but they're moving a little bit faster than we can see. So you can start to see how the objects are moving within this three-dimensional space. Now this kind of technique really is going to work. The 3D in Flash would lend itself much better if I were to let's go grab my text tool. Classic. We're not going to do times today. Use good old standby of Trebuchet. Need a nice dark color so it shows. No, I've had the pig layer is now, that's a tween layer, so I've now added some text that I will convert to a symbol. And now that it is a symbol, it's ready for me to do something to it, though. I'm just going to go in. That's too small for you guys to really enjoy. So if my pigs are here, what works better is if I wanted to do, I'm just going to hide the pig so we can see it. So if here's my title, this is where the 3D rotation tool really excels. And it also, if I want to adjust where I'm rotating, I can move my registration point. So if I want to rotate around this point right there, now when I, okay, now just grab the circle here. Now I can control that rotation. So we can see if I rotate on the y-axis, it gives me this cool spin. So if I wanted to rotate like that, so I get this cool, ooh, look, it's 3D text. But then if I decide that, well, now my next thing is going to be rotating on the x-axis. And then we can rotate all over the place. So it really, I think I just broke it there. That was one too many rotates for it. So you can create these rotations, and then if you want, you could even create that little like spinning logo effect. So if you had a logo graphic, you could bring it in and do a little spin with it and be all fancy. Ooh, look at that! I spun them. Yeah, okay. It was really trendy, you know, a while ago when it was hard to do, but now that the tools can do it and it's not hard anymore, you have to have a good, compelling reason to use it. Running the awesome pigs in space, we can see it rotates, moves around. It's not very exciting because I know you can do so much better than that with yours. If you do just a little bit of the 3D, a little bit of real subtle 3D shake, you can create some really rich graphics with it. So right now, while I did kind of make fun of, oh, get the that, let's go through and I'm going to remove the tween off of that and now put the tween back on. But if I take this title, and if I want it to stay stationary for a little bit, then it's going to start moving. So I go a little ways out, I hit F6, so that now forces a keyframe. Beginning and this keyframe are now the same. So I force that keyframe in place. And now I can't even decide, I can force another keyframe. So I have those beginning and ending points set. And now at this point, I'm going to rotate this on the y-axis just a little bit this way. I want to do it sooner. A little bit this way. No, oh, come on, really? Wow. Okay, I'm gonna just undo a bunch. That should have worked, but oh well. It didn't. So I have that. It holds its position. Fine. I'll go a little bit of movement this way. Go here. A little bit of movement this way. Go here. Just a wee bit of movement. Wee bit of movement. And now we can go to this object, and it looks, yeah, I think it's back, so it is back to where it needs to be. So now if we run that, we'll see it hold still, and then gives just a little bit of shake. Now that kind of use of the 3D capabilities in Flash is highly encouraged, because you can add just a little bit of richness, especially if you do that on top of other artwork or other existing graphics, so it further emphasizes its 3D qualities. That can give you a really nice effect. But doing the whole full-on, I'm spinning, moving, warping, twisting 3D because it doesn't work really well. So I think this is what I would argue is a better use of it as 3D, but your mileage will vary based on what your project is. And I'm hoping that you will use good judgment in terms of what you decide to apply it to. Because I like how that's got that little, like, it pulls and then it snaps back, so it's got a little spring to it. It's kind of fun. One of the worst things you can do when you're animating is to have your movement occur in a fixed linear amount of time. It really works best if you think in terms of ramping up or ramping down, or move to something, go past, and then bounce back. So you start to get squash and stretch. You start to get elasticity. That makes for a much more dynamic, less computer-derived movement. If everything moves at a fixed constant velocity, it's immediately accelerated to full speed, and when something's done, it's immediately, ends its movement. That's not very exciting to watch. It's not very natural to watch. It looks very robotic. So unless you're animating a robot, I would encourage you to move away from that. But if you want to animate a robot and contrast that with a non-robot so you can demonstrate both types of movement, that would just be absolutely awesome. Z-Space will only work on a movie clip. So if the object I am trying to work on is not a movie clip, lost my document here. So if the object that I'm working on is not a movie clip, I do not have access to Z-Space. If it's a graphic symbol, if it's just artwork, there's no Z. It has to be a movie clip for me to do any Z-Space work on it, and then I can grab the 3D rotation or translation tool. The translation tool allows me to move objects in that 3D space, so I can move across, up and down, or front and back.
But your Z value is moving. It's going up and down.
My values were changing when I was modifying my Z value. Then it was moving, because this is the Z translation, not the Z rotation tool right here. But if I use the rotation tool, then it rotates on my different axes, my X, Y, or Z, depending on what I'm doing. I think I just broke it. Ooh, that's kind of fun. Start with it a little bit crooked there, a little bit more. So it starts crooked, rotates in, and then it does its little wiggle. I kind of like my animation. So we can bring in the title, My Pigs in Space, put it back to a normal layer. We can watch those animate. So we can see how they move. No, my title's being lost behind the chaos of what's going on. What I have here is creating the illusion of moving down a three-dimensional channel or space. Now, this particular artwork, as it's been constructed and is being animated, if I keep double-clicking on it, what I will realize is, wrong item. The artwork is just simply a movie clip that's constructed of a series of rectangles. So this is, if we keep going, we can see it's just a brick. And if I decide today that my bricks shouldn't be gray, but my brick should be filled with, so if it's more of a red brick, I can turn the whole wall red in one click because it's all constructed of the same brick, and then individual bricks just had color effects applied to them, making them either a little bit brighter or darker as necessary, so that I could, and actually if we just go through and select a number of them, then we could apply that brightness. Just hold down Shift, click on any collection of bricks that I want. And now I can create that nice variation in my brick wall. Now we can see that because both walls are composed of the same thing with different brightnesses attached to them, and then a tween has been applied to the pair of the two walls. So each wall, as we go inside the hallway view, had a 3D rotation applied to it. So the walls then were rotated on the y-axis. So each wall was just rotated in. Now I found out the hard way. I rotated, instead of from this end of the wall, I tried to rotate from the end of the hallway wall and rotated it out, and it created something where it was trying to travel about 150,000 pixels in space just with the basic rotation, and then I couldn't do anything. I couldn't animate, I couldn't change. Flash just freaked out on me. So by going too big, it freaked out, but by bringing this where now I'm taking each of these pieces and shrinking them down or making them smaller, and now that I've done that, I can switch to my translation tool. No, wrong option there. I'm going to move on the x-axis there. So now I can pull the wall pieces tighter. We can see now I'm starting to enclose the corner. So I've constructed this corner space. And if I need to rotate or pull it out a little bit, you can see that now tightens up the corner, and now it's pretty close, and for what Flash is going to be able to handle, it's probably all it's going to be able to do. So we can now see, and if we need to slow it down just so it's not so dramatic, we can now see that we're flying into that space. So we can use the tool to produce some kind of cool effects depending on what you're trying to do. Oh, no wonder it's not working. You gotta switch over to the select tool when you're trying to go into a symbol. So now if I zoom out a little bit more like this, we can go find a wall here and put in another wall. In this particular wall, I'm going to color this one a little bit differently and change its shape and form. wrong axis. Let's rotate it. Remembering from the pigs how I can rotate to that point. So rotate on my x-axis to create my floor structure. Now this object here is not really the same. It's not really the same shape as the other, so it's not going to be a perfect perspective in the corner, but it is going to give me a good starting point. And now if you take this object and we arrange it, and if we send it to the back so it's behind the others, we can see we've now created an illusion. But I can see its center point is not lined up at the corner. See how that registration point? So as we move into space there, I need to move it over a little bit and line up that registration hole. Ooh, that might actually work. So I've got a little movement going on, but again, the 3D tool here is not designed for doing full-on 3D, but if you're careful with what you do, if I choose a floor that doesn't have the same brick pattern but is a smooth texture, I could probably pull this off so that it looks more convincing and doesn't look like it's sliding. And remembering that animation really, it's all about creating the illusion. So you show a person running from the waist up. It looks like they're running even though we can't see their legs. That's okay. If you think in terms of you're creating what a camera would see. Every movie, every television show you watch spends the majority of its time when it's showing characters, it shows them from the waist up or even from the shoulders up. That's the majority of the shots. They rarely spend the whole episode only showing the entire person, the entire body. They usually are doing some type of medium shot that's only a partial selection of the individual. So when you think in terms of what do you have to animate, not all of it. You don't have to animate all of that character all of the time. So then if you want to have someone walking, you can do it from the waist up. Putting scenes into your project is a very useful activity when you want to go from one to something else. And we can see currently we start out at scene 1. Now scenes are something that Flash has kind of tried to diminish a little bit and move away from as Adobe was promoting and really pushing the interactive aspects and capabilities of Flash. But when you look at it from an animation standpoint, scenes kick butt. Because now if I want to add a new scene, it's effectively starting my timeline and layers over without having to have a new project. So I still will have everything that's in my library, but if I go under other panels, I will find scene. So you'll notice they've hid this effectively instead of having it out there in the open. So a lot of people think it's gone or they don't even realize it's there. But when I say pull up my scene panel, I can add a new scene. So I'm going to name this first one outside, and I'll go into the second one and call it inside. So now that I have my inside scene, I'll just dock this over here so I can come back to it when I need to. And now that I have my inside scene, so if I have my inside scene and I'll have a window here, and then I'll have a wall. Oh, wrong tool. There we go. I'll fill that. Now I've intentionally left that hollow in the middle because that's now my window opening, and I'm going to put something out there. So I have my wall. I can add a new layer, and on this layer, actually, I can go add in my my ground and things weren't symbols yet, and I I want my sky and ground to be part of it. So let's unlock those. Choose the ground here. And choose my sky. So now that I've done that, I could even go through and just select everything. I can copy it. Now if we go back to my inside scene, okay, I thought I copied it, but apparently it's remembering the pigs from earlier. So let's try again. Everything is selected here. Copy. I've pasted it. I used paste in place, so it's paste with a shift, so it put it in the exact same position it was before. If I put my wall on top, we can see my wall is there. So now I could even adjust everything. So we'll just pull everything down a little bit, so then the mountains and clouds. So we'll assume that we have a slightly different perspective here. And because the clouds were moving before, no, I don't want to. Let's take those objects and distribute my two clouds. Select the clouds, create motion tweens, and we'll just move them just a little bit. Oh. Move to the end of time and then just move them a little bit. Doesn't really matter where they started. So now I have the clouds going. Extend my layer out. So now I have my outside scene, my inside scene. If I run the movie, we'll see there's looking from the outside, and then it goes to the inside scene. But the good part about this is by having this second scene, I can very easily navigate to it. I don't end up having to put all these layers into its own folder, collapse that up, and end up with a timeline that is super long. I can now consolidate what would be each camera shot into its own individual self-contained timeline, group of layers, group of frames, which makes working with it easier. And if I want to change the order of those scenes, I can just very easily drag them in my scene palette. So that works out really slick that way. And then now we can see we start from the inside and then work our way out.